Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Aisha Subarkash. It's been more than 3 years since Saudi Arabia led an economic and diplomatic siege on Qatar that divided the Gulf nations. But now there could be a breakthrough in sight. Hopes for an end to the crisis have grown after U.S. brokered talks to resolve the dispute, which many analysts see as a last-ditch effort by the White House to secure more diplomatic wins in the Middle East before President Donald Trump leaves office. Before we discuss what has changed in the past 3 years and whether the Saudi-Qatar ties can be repaired, let's take a look at this report to see what was the dispute all about. And joining me now from Muscat is Abdullah Baabood, who is a visiting professor at Waseda University in Tokyo, Japan, and former director of the Center for Gulf Studies at Qatar University. And from Washington, D.C., Giorgio Cafiero, founder and CEO of Gulf State Analytics, a geopolitical risk consultancy focusing on the Middle East. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you on the program. So, Abdullah, Saudi foreign minister said a final agreement is expected soon. What do you think this agreement is comprised of?
Well, we have been hearing some bits and pieces of news from here and there. It's not definitely sure what is going to include. However, the fact that there is a move towards reconciliation between Qatar and its neighbors is actually good news for the region and also for the organization of the Gulf Cooperation Council. I think mostly it will comprise of the ability of these countries to work together and to build their own regional institution, which is the GCC. Mm-hmm. It will obviously tackle some of the thorny issues that have been raised before, not necessarily the 13 demands that came in the when initially the blockade started, mm-hmm. But I'm sure there are other issues that they can include, even if it's for a face-saving arrangement, just to show to the people that this was not done in vain, and we've got something out of Qatar.
As you've just mentioned, Doha promised to maintain its policies and is refused fulfilling any demands that undermine its sovereignty, Georgia. So what has been achieved or lost after this 3-year blockade of Qatar?
Well, there is trust that has been seriously eroded between Qatar on one side and the blockading states on the other. Perhaps a piece of paper can be signed to reestablish diplomatic and economic relations, but there's going to be a future in which it will be very difficult for us to imagine officials in Doha having any sort of trust in the GCC. Could it be established over time? Certainly. But, this crisis will have an impact on the way in which the people and the government of Qatar look at their neighbors on the Arabian Peninsula and how they look at the GCC as an institution. And, there are many problems that will continue between Qatar and the countries that spent the past 3.5 years blockading Qatar. That being said, this is definitely a positive move in the right direction, but we'll have to see what happens in the weeks, months, and years ahead.
So, Abdullah, why do you think the outgoing President Trump is pushing for a deal just before he leaves office? What's at stake for the U.S. or for Trump?
Well, I think there are different scenarios to explain what happened. First of all, we have to remember that Trump was instrumental in actually in the beginning of this crisis. If it wasn't for him, this crisis would probably not happen. That's one thing. And maybe he wants to leave with it behind him. But I think it's more than that. I think he wants to get the GCC states back together in his efforts towards this maximum pressure towards Iran. Because from his perspective, Iran benefits from this crisis. Obviously, everybody benefited from this crisis except the GCC states themselves. It's been costly to everybody. And I think he also wanted to deprive the forthcoming president, Biden, from any credit to say that he has done it.
Maybe
so
he would like to use it as a bid for re-election in 2024. So, Giorgio, the International Atomic Energy Agency said that Tehran is preparing to install hundreds of advanced uranium-enriching centrifuges. So how could a unified Gulf will impact Iran's influence in the region?
Well, I think it's important to realize that as a consequence of the blockade, Doha had essentially no choice but to turn to Tehran for deeper cooperation. And I think the hope is that if at least the Saudis end their blockade of Qatar, Doha would become less dependent on Iran, and possibly Doha would move more back to the sort of Arabian fold against Iran, if you will. However, I think that this might be a little bit too optimistic from the standpoint of those in the U.S. administration who want GCC states to unite against Iran. I don't see Doha embracing some aggressive anti-Iranian foreign policy. Again, even if there's a restoration of ties between Riyadh and Doha, I think officials in Doha will probably continue to see the Saudi kingdom posing a bigger threat to Qatar's sovereignty than Iran. I think Qatar will try to balance its neighbors against one another rather than firmly siding with Saudi Arabia against Iran. Having said that, though, it's important to keep in mind that the Qataris have had to use Iranian airspace as a consequence of the siege that went into effect in 2017. And this has provided Iran with revenue, which the Trump administration would like to see Iran cease to benefit from. And I think that could definitely be an outcome from the Saudis opening up their airspace to Qatar if this is going to happen.
So at the end of the day, Abdullah, what do you think has prompted those nations, Saudi Arabia in particular, of course, to come to an agreement with Qatar?
Basically has demonstrated that there is no rationality in the decision-making within the GCC. And the GCC is very important to Saudi Arabia and to also other member states.
Do you believe that the MBS is taking a back seat now?
That may be one way of looking at it, but I also think that the Saudis have realized that that they wanted to reconcile some time ago, and this is not the first time that we've seen a breakthrough. There has been some discussions between them and Qatar several times, but it has fallen on deaf ears. And I think now, because of the pressure it seems that they are moving. It may be that the MBS wants to take a back seat as well, because there is a lot of pressure on him with the upcoming president, Biden, who's been promising that he would be more critical of Saudi Arabia than Trump was.
So, Giorgio, what do you make of the recent contact between Saudi King Salman and Turkish President Erdogan? Do you believe that Saudi Arabia is revisiting its foreign policy? And do you believe that Turkey and Saudi Arabia can come to better terms moving forward?
The answer to your two questions is yes. I think that as a consequence of the change in leadership in Washington, Saudi Arabia is starting to revisit some of the important aspects of its foreign policy. I think what we might be seeing right now is a switch in Riyadh's foreign policy away from more bellicose, aggressive policies toward ones which are more pragmatic. And this is not to say that Saudi Arabia and Turkey are about to have an excellent relationship. There are many conflicts of interest between Riyadh and Ankara. Those are not about to go away. But again, I think there's going to be an easing of friction between Saudi Arabia and Turkey. And I don't think that the United States is the only factor in play, but I do think the transition from the Trump administration to the Biden administration is a very, very important variable in the equation.
So, Abdullah, very briefly, if Saudi Arabia and Qatar make a peace and relations take a positive turn between Saudi Arabia and Turkey, how will this impact the United Arab Emirates?
From the Saudi perspective, they'd like to see the other countries do the same. And this is what they have actually announced as well. So I think they will push their other partners to do the same. I think the United Arab Emirates is also, been having some very active foreign policy. And I think with the new administration, with the changes in the geopolitics, regionally and internationally, I think we will see some kind of a toning down of some of the UAE foreign policy and more, rationality into that and less activism.
And we will see how likely it is for Egypt to join any reconciliation deal with Qatar as long as Doha continue to support the Muslim Brotherhood. Gentlemen, unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you very much for joining us on Straight Talk. Tensions are growing in the Kurdish region of northern Iraq, where recent clashes between the PKK terror group and Kurdistan Regional Government are raising fears of an all-out war. This comes as authorities in Erbil and the Iraqi central government have decided to take a unified stance against the terror group and end its long presence in the mountains of northern Iraq. Haider Abbasi explains.
Sinjar from above. Iraq's military has been clearing the northern district of armed groups. Since the fall of Daesh last year, various militias have gained control of Sinjar, but now the government wants them out.
December the 1st is the day of the implementation of the Sinjar deal, the deal signed between the Iraqi government and the government of the Kurdistan region. This agreement foresees the return of internally displaced people and launches the reconstruction of Sinjar. Under this agreement, only the Iraqi flag can be raised and only Iraqi federal security forces can be present.
One of the major armed groups operating in Sinjar is the PKK terrorist organization. For years, the Kurdish Regional Government has tolerated the PKK, but it seems that's now coming to an end. And there are fears of a possible war. Since the security deal was made, the PKK has launched several attacks against the regional government. In October, the PKK was accused of killing a security official. Later that month, it bombed an oil pipeline to Turkey, stopping imports. And in November, the PKK killed a KRG soldier and wounded 2 others. For its part, the Kurdish Regional Government says it doesn't want a war with the PKK, but insists it won't allow the terror group to undermine its authority. The KRG says hundreds of people are unable to return to their villages in northern Iraq because they're occupied by the PKK. The regional government also accuses the terror group of imposing illegal taxes on villagers. And many Iraqis allege the PKK is kidnapping their children and forcibly recruiting them. The PKK has around 5,000 fighters based in the Kandil Mountains of northern Iraq. It's listed as a terrorist organization by the United States, the European Union, and Turkey. The group has waged a terror campaign against Turkey for 30 years, which has led to the deaths of 40,000 people. Turkey says it supports the operation to push the PKK out of Sinjar and is monitoring the situation closely. Could this be the beginning of the end of the PKK in Iraq? Haider Abbasi, Straight Talk.
And to break it all down for us, we have Saad Al-Muttalibi, who is a political security advisor for Baghdad Security Council, and Murat Aslan, a security researcher at SETA Foundation. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you on the program. So, Saad, why this deal signed under the auspices of the United Nations is so important, and what kind of impact it will have on the region moving forward?
Yes, thank you very much. The importance of that deal in particular is that we are depriving, or the government of Iraq and KRG are depriving PKK from the important foothold in Sinjar and basically in Kurdistan. But I do believe that this, hopefully, this will lead to a better regional understanding. The four countries, Iran, Turkey, Syria, and Iraq, need to have a regional understanding on how to utilize the potential influence they have among themselves into formulating a security plan that would provide security and stability to this region. As we all know that the international powers have a great deal of interest in this region, and with the distribution of decisions in these regional countries, the superpowers can simply utilize their influence in turning one side against the other, as we could see very clearly in Syria. And we saw that in Iraq, and it is practiced in Iran, and maybe in the future practiced within the borders of Turkey. So I do believe that the need for better regional cooperation.
Yeah, so Murat, how is this, talk to us actually about the strategic importance of Sinjar, both for Iraq and Turkey, and how has deal played out so far? Can we say that all the armed elements are cleared off, or they just retreated to mountains?
This agreement between Iraq and Kurdish regional government is really brilliant and promising. And I believe that Turkey supports it because PKK is a threat to the overall region. The question should be asked, what is the difference of Daesh and PKK? Because Daesh, with the motivation of building up a religious state on Syria and Iraq, expanded in the region, and PKK does want the same thing. They have offshoots in Syria, and now they are in Sinjar, and they are trying to establish a kind of linkages between the camps that they are operating in. So that means Iraq and Kurdish regional government perceives this formation as a threat, and Sinjar seems to be the critical point that should be prevented of having PKK establish a kind of dominant structure over there. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, they will just establish a kind of continuity. On the other hand, Turkey is in a clear understanding that Turkey supports it, because if PKK is in Iraq, that means military operations in Iraq will continue, and Iraq does not want it. On the other hand, it's also an opportunity. Kurdish regional government and Iraqi central government has a common understanding after 2017, and they both perceive PKK as a challenger for their existence and sovereignty.
Yeah. So, Saad, is there a risk of an all-out conflict between the Iraqi forces and the PKK? And do you believe that the PKK will leave the region peacefully?
No, definitely not. PKK will fight and will utilize all their potential possibilities that they have from local cooperation, political cooperation, and definitely international efforts into persisting to preserve their positions. If not in Sinjar, maybe in Qandil, maybe in another region. We know there are few Turkish bases in the region, but their influence is not very visible because there isn't any political understanding between these countries. What we are doing now is firefighting. We are trying to resolve a bigger picture by dealing with very small parts of that picture until we all understand that this big picture needs to be dealt with simultaneously with regional cooperation. I do believe that if not ISIS, if not PKK, maybe tomorrow one of their offshoots, PKK offshoots in Syria or maybe in Iran, will be able to revive itself and create another future challenge to the region.
Yeah. So, Murat, we know that most of the PKK terrorists hold Hashd-e-Shaabi identities, which is an Iranian-affiliated terror organization. So how do you think the KRG, do you think it will need an international cooperation while dealing with the PKK and at the same time Hashd al-Shaabi? And where does this deal leave that terror group?
Actually, that's exactly what the regional dynamics represents, because as you know, Hashd-e-Shaabi is under the authority of the Iraqi government, though have clear connections with Iran. At the meantime, in the Kandil mountain, PKK has some kind of relations with Iran.
Yes.
And at the meantime, Kurdish regional government is a bit fragmented in terms of relations with PKK. So if you just gather all sub-dynamics in a single picture, Iran appears to be the significant actor that will either encourage PKK and Hashd-e-Shaabi cooperate and establish a kind of bridge with Syria just to have Iranian support to Iranian militias in Syria, and at the meantime challenge the US supported mechanisms, because we know that US is in a clear action to divert PYD with PKK.
Yes.
Because this is very essential for their coming terms strategy.
So, Saad, how will the PKK's evacuation from the region would impact YPG in northern Syria?
Oh, the danger is that they will move into Syria and strengthen their positions in Syria, and again come back either to Turkey or to Iraq with a greater, more organized forces and better understanding of the battle they are leading. So just moving them out of Sinjar, I don't believe that is the final solution. And I do object of calling Hashd al-Shaabi an Iranian militia. Hashd al-Shaabi has a law in Iraq, and they are officially under the command of the supreme commander, the prime minister, the Iraqi prime minister, and they cannot do anything without the approval of the Iraqi government. There may be some splinter groups or some unauthorized militia doing certain things, but that is definitely not al-Hashd al-Shaabi.
So if they, Murat, move to Syria, how would a Biden presidency would deal with the YPG, because Turkey sees it, it's affiliated to the PKK. It's all known, it's all documented by international bodies that PKK and its alleged affiliates, such as the US-backed Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces in northern Syria, they also continue to make use of child fighters. So what do you expect from the new US administration?
Well, it's a legal act in the United States that PKK is a terrorist organization. And once you provide support to this organization, it's a crime in the US law. That's very clear. Second thing, I think the new administration in the United States will review the relations with Turkey. And the major issue and concern that's in question is the relations with PKK and PYD of the United States by means of CENTCOM, that means Pentagon. I think Biden is aware of that. And, he will just drive a kind of strategy that will balance. But at the meantime, he wants to rid of the burden in Syria And I think they will review PYD status quo, and they had actually started it by establishing an environment that will meet all Kurdish segments of Syrian communities. There are many in Turkey living as an immigrant. So I think the United States will review the relations with Turkey and decide afterwards about this.
Yeah, we'll see about that. All right, gentlemen, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining us on Straight Talk. And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Ayşe Süberkaş. If you've got any comments, follow us and tweet us at Straight Talk TRT. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.